All right, thank you everybody for coming to my talk. Iceman just knocked it out of the park, and I feel really inadequate standing up here. Thank you. I would first like to thank the organizers for allowing me to be here. This talk has been, I've been trying to come to SAINTCON over a decade, but every year for the last decade, I ran my own conference back in Tokyo the exact same week SAINTCON happened. So I haven't been able to come out here. I'm super glad I'm out here. My talk is going to be a bit different. There's not much technical stuff. It's more of a personal journey about me as a making hacker or a hacker who makes gadgets. So I wanted to see my notes, but I can't, so it will be a bit weird, but we'll try. Disclaimer, there will be profanities in this presentation. I'm sorry if I offend you. That's not my intent, but it's part of my nature. And all the other more disclaimer stuff you see in more responsible people's presentations. If you're under 45, there's going to be references in this slide deck that don't make sense to you. So try to find somebody old and ask them if you don't understand where the reference come from. So if you're over 45, raise your hand so that the young people know who to ask for referential questions. Right. So who am I? You know, Grifter once said that even if you're in a room full of friends, you should do a proper introduction. So my name is ElKentaro. One of the most frequent questions I get is, El, your real name? It's not. It's like, it's Spanish, like El Chapo, El Samurai, El Diablo. In 2004, my friend was running a pro wrestling blog, and I commented as ElKentaro because I was a big fan of El Samurai, the wrestler. And that just kind of stuck. So I've been ElKentaro since 2004. Now, I'm not Joe Grant. I'm not Iceman. I'm not Dark Matter. I'm not Lost Boy. I have had people come up to me and ask me if I could identify the chip in an access card, or if they like my Wi-Fi cactus, you know, if I had the Iceman firmware for the Flipper Zero. I don't. So I'm not. I had people come up to me if I was the guy who designed the DEF CON badges. I don't. So who am I actually? And this is funny because even some of my friends who I've known over my decades, like Joe Grant, 2 days ago goes, hey, Kentaro, what is it that you actually do? And I'm like, Joe, we go back like close to 2 decades by now. My day job is a freelance translator. I work, 80% of my job is what they said to them, and they said to them. That's all I do. But predominantly my clientele base is now in the InfoSec industry. That's how I got kind of involved. That's why I know a lot of stuff, but I don't do any DFIR, I don't do any SOC work, I don't do threat intelligence. I work to help Japanese organizations deal with overseas organizations. But I am a hacker deep down inside. So in Japanese, there's this word called hitotonari, and it means the basic characteristics that you're usually born with or that defines you. So Joe said that, you know, in his keynote, he said that there's a hacker in all of us, right? And I think that sentence is correct, but it's incomplete. You have to think yourself as a hacker, and that's the only requisite that, you know, the hacker club has. That if you think yourself as a hacker, I think you're a hacker. So now let's go into the presentation. It's 28 slides long. This is slide number 6 if you lost count. These are all the slides, so if you take a picture of that, you can leave my talk, and we'll be done. So why do I make stuff, right? Because there was a time where we were all dependent on vendors, right? Many of the graybeards who are hackers, we had no option of manufacturing. We had to buy products, and we had to hack them to make them do things we wanted to do that was away from what the vendor or the manufacturer intended, right? But now, we are in a renaissance of making, right? We can do custom PCBs, we can do 3D printing, we can do CNCs, we can do firmware level coding, right? All of these rapid prototyping tools that were previously only available to vendors, we now as individuals have access to. So we are in a great time to bring your imaginations, or my imaginations, into reality, right? On a personal note, making saved my life. So about a decade and a half ago, I was in the advertising agency world, so I was living the madman life. I was drinking, smoking, partying. I was good times Tokyo. But I felt empty, right? And then something broke, and I picked up my soldering iron, and I had to fix it. And it reignited a fire in me that was, oh, I forgot how much I enjoyed building Lego sets, or tinkering with a broken stereo when I was in high school, or like changing the crystals on my radio so I could get better frequency coverage, in high school. So it truly saved my life. I got rid of a lot of my vices. I still have some. I'm still working on it. I'm not perfect by any chance, but I realized that a lot of the poor life choices I made was because I was mentally bored. And making and hacking reignited a fire in me going, I was mentally busy enough that I didn't go, I'm bored, I'm gonna get fucked up and wasted tonight again, right? So, now I have a couple of rules when it comes to making. My builds, which I brought over here, and I will go over individually, but they have to tell a story. So I often, when I start building something, it comes out of either a need or a want, but this next step that I go through is I start building a story behind that build. My favorite theme is dystopian near future. So think of Mad Max, Book of Eli, Event Horizon. Every build that I do is actually, I spend a lot more time thinking about what universe that gadget will live in before I actually engage on it. So, and also having spent over a decade in the advertising world, I worked with designers, right? Graphic designers, classically trained graphic designers, industrial designers, product designers, photographers, and artists. And they taught me how to look at things, not only from my perspective, but as a user interaction perspective. So I tend to, focus on looks more than just functionality. Louis Sullivan, the architect or the pioneer in the skyscraper architecture, said form follows function. And then Frank Lloyd Wright picked it up and said form and function are one. What they meant is that when you design a building, the functionality of that building has to be considered in its design from the very beginning, right? So that's one of the rules that I follow, right? How does my device going to interact with, if I hand it off to somebody else, what would they think about, right? What story is it supposed to tell? I also like to use off-the-shelf parts, and the reason why is that I'm impatient, so I don't have time to wait for custom parts to get done and shipped to me. But I also think that if I want to put things out there that people can replicate on their own, if they like it, and tell their own story through their makings. The other thing that I have a kind of a pet peeve about this is user safety. This comes from my background as a user interaction design, working with these people. I hate when badge designers put a bare LiPo battery on their badge. Because one, they're gonna hug each other. Somebody's gonna have a spiky solder that might puncture the battery. And that could lead to horrible outcomes. So user safety is something I consider. There have been devices that I've built that I haven't shared the design or the fact that I actually built something because I just couldn't find a good enough reason to share about it. So, those are the kind of things that I put on myself as rules when it comes to building. All right, now to the fun stuff. Memes to reality. These are builds by me that were inspired by the internet. AI machine learning is the hottest thing, so I went to DALL-E and I said, give me an image that explains internet memes. According to our AI overlords, that explains internet memes. I have no idea what that is. And people are like, oh, is that Japanese? It's like, no, it's not, it's garbage. It's like, like, it's not even a word. And that's like a drunk cat that's, I don't know, has a tiger complex or something. Oh, by the way, slide 9. Slide 9, if you lost count. So these are some of the memes to reality builds that I've built. There was a period, I think after Mr. Robot aired, that everybody online was like, I'm weaponizing a Raspberry Pi, pulling all the networks. And we're like, yeah, but you're just installing Kali on a Raspberry Pi and walking around with it, right? So I ended up building a brass knucks case out of a PLA called Polymax, which is a high impact resistant PLA that you can use in a 3D printer. And it has a Raspberry Pi Zero, which has a Pwn Pi, which was a Dropbox pen test distribution back then. And the USB will slide out like a jackknife. So you actually could punch the security guard, flip out the USB stem, and plug it into the computer, right? So I said, that's a weaponized Raspberry Pi, right? And
safety was that?
Well, yeah, so okay. I'm still working on my character, right? So then this fuck you keyboard started filling my Twitter, and I was like, oh, I can build that. So I grabbed Tinsy, which is one of my favorite microcontroller. I printed the case. I ordered the keycaps. The toughest thing was finding the keycaps that matched the color of the meme, because I was like, the fonts are off, the color is off, but eventually I found it. And then people, I don't even know when this was, but there was a wave of things that people were like, I'm triggered, or I'm triggering, or that became a thing. And I'm looking at this like, no, you're not. You're just being sensitive about shit, right? So I ended up building an ESP8266 servo-powered automatic trigger mechanism that if you tweet a specific tweet with a hashtag, it will activate the servo, and it will unload the magazine of my airsoft machine gun. I have video of that. So here you see me tweeting out on the left. That's the Twitter. This is my workshop, by the way. I was cleaning this BB bullets for a month after this experiment. So the way it works is that you tweet out a specific tweet with a specific hashtag. This is the old API, so it won't work anymore. The ESP8266 connects to my home network, pulls the API, and see if the hashtag has been used, and it unloads the magazine. So now this is one of those things that I've never shared the source code or the design for it, because I figured somebody's going to actually put it on a real gun, and I don't want that on my conscience. So. Then smart bottles came on the market, bottles that told you when you hydrated or you hydrated enough or not. So I was like, well, I can make one that's more hackery. So I took an ESP8266, filled the matrix, totally looked like a bomb going through TSA. It's one of those builds when people come up to me, it's like, hey, I like the build that you made that looks like a bomb, and I have to go, which one? The 7seg display would display the hacker manifesto by the mentor until somebody launches a DDoS attack. Then everything goes red, starts blinking, and it totally looks like a bomb is armed. Some of the other ones, the packet injector was featured on a Hack5 interview that I did with them. Beacon flooding attacks is one of my favorite Wi-Fi pranks. And I was just thinking about this, like, it would be really cool if I had a syringe that if I pressed down on the plunger, it was just sending out beacons into the air. So it's basically an ESP8266 with a barometric pressure sensor on it, and the syringe chamber is capped so that if you hit a certain pressure inside, it will activate the switch, and it will start beacon flooding packets into the air, so truly injecting packets. The next one is one of those references that if you're young, you're going to have to ask somebody else. It's a beacon spammer, which is pretty much the same as the packet injector, but this one goes to 11. So there's a rotary encoder there that it goes to 11. So there was a period in my workshop that I kept injuring myself. And you know how factories have end days since last incident? And I was like, well, I'm gonna need one of those. So I built this button that every time I injured or burned myself or cut myself, I could hit it. It would reset the counter, log the time and date to a file, and tweet out there was an incident in my bat cave. A year later, I was like, man, I need to work on my skills, and it kind of worked out. I haven't gotten injured as much since that period, so, you know. I think, you know, it's like Ed was giving the social engineering to change your own behavior talk. I think this is one of those kind of examples. Tesla came out with their Cybertruck, and everybody was making fun of the aluminum brushed looks it had. So I grabbed a soda can, and like after hours and hours of various grit of sandpaper brushing, I replicated the aluminum brushed look. And then I grabbed the vinyl cutter and made an energy drink prototype called Cyber with more RAM. I was trying to get Tesla to market this, but I never got an answer back. So these are some of the meme builds that I've done from reality. I also wanted the arcade cabinet, but I don't have the I live in Tokyo, so I don't have the space to put a full arcade cabinet in there. So I ended up building one out of a Raspberry Pi 4 LCD screen, but I wanted to create one that had the analog 8-directional joystick and the crappy buttons that you had on an arcade cabinet. So I cut the case out of plywood, I put an acrylic top, all the stickers I collected over DEF CON over the years, I plastered it, and I gave it a clear coat. The top part is a NeoPixel strip with a neon green acrylic that I cut, and then I put the arcade letters on vinyl on the back, and yeah, oops, sorry, bad. So it plays perfect, and it rotates, so, you know. And as you can see from my hand, it's about this big. And I went to the dollar store, got the crappiest speakers I could find, and designed it in a way that they will bounce through to the cabinet itself, so it replicate the sound of a crappy arcade. Exactly the same, so. There was a time I went down a foxhole on YouTube about these crypto bros building like 25 GPU parallel crypto miners. And they were like, yo, we're here mining this coin, man. And I'm like, no, like 5 hours of them talking about how they mine coins with these various GPUs. And I went down that road hard, but I felt hypocritical making fun of them without having built a crypto miner on my own. So I got a couple GPUs. This is like 1050, so they're not high-end. I just wanted to build a crypto miner so I could make fun of them without being too hypocritical. Like I said before I picked up making, I was a degenerate gambler. I spent a lot of money in Vegas. One of my favorite slots was this slot machine. It's the Blazing 7 Double. So I went on eBay and bought an actual Blazing 7 Double glass payout table from a Vegas slot machine. So then I rebuilt the PC chassis to host 4 GPUs, and the glass plane would just sit on front of it. And then I went on YouTube and I tried to find people playing that slot machine so I can get the sound out of it. So I don't know if you can hear this, but now it comes with sound effects. So yeah, there's a button there that will randomly play an MP3 file, and one of them is a jackpot. Some of them are smaller wins. So I built a crypto miner slot machine. But yeah, so those are the kind of things that I like to build, right? Now, sewing, I do a lot of sewing too. Like this PC sleeve is one of the things. Once again, our AI overlords thinks that's a hacker sewing. I have no idea what that is, but if you go down the rabbit hole of make your own gear, #MYOG, there's a wonderful world out there of high-tech fabrics. So when you look at backpacks these days, if you see the diamond pattern like that, this is a very specific high-tech fabric called VX, and you can get it in different weights. It's really fun. And this came out of a need, right? I do a lot of long distance war walking, and I needed backpacks that could hold my rigs, cool them, and also, allow me to put like power bars and my water and whatnot in there. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she mentioned like I was having issues with a bag design, and she goes, "Well, why don't you buy a cheap one and just take it apart to see how it works?" And I was like, reverse engineering. Right? So, she taught me that it definitely is reverse engineering. So I bought a bag, I took it apart, and looked at the seams. I figured out how they were done, and that's how I ended up creating my own version of that. And that, very much like hacking, you can do a full scratch build from scratch, or you can buy an off-the-shelf backpack and customize it, right? So these are some of the more specific need bags that I've made. Like I said, I do a lot of war walking, which is war driving, long distances with rigs. So I needed a backpack that had a full mesh on one side so it will cool down my rig, but it had a closed chamber on the other side so I could put in my nutrition, my first aid kit, change of clothes. And then I wanted to build a little war driving sacoche that doesn't shake but kept my phones upright when I went for like a quick jog in the neighborhood or when I was on the road in a hotel. Then one day, Dark Matter showed up in my neighborhood, and he was fumbling around with five phones going, "Oh, I got to collect all these Pokemons." I'm like, "I can fix that for you, you know that, right?" So I ended up making the Pokemon Bandolier, which is like a bandolier, Wookiee bandolier inspired, that hosts 5 phones for him, so he can play all the Pokemon all the time.
And it was amazing.
People are like, "Where did you buy that?" And Mike is like, "Nah, he made it." So, I used to carry this big phone, the iPhone 6 Pro, or whatever it was, and then it had a battery pack, and it was this massive phone, and it would never fit in my pocket. So I was thinking, I wanted a holster, but I didn't want one of those daddy holsters, the ones that my dad has that you kind of slide it. I was like, nah. So I was watching Star Wars, and Han Solo's blaster holster is kind of cool. It's kind of unpractical because it sits kind of low, but it just hangs off his thigh. I was like, that's where I want my phone. But I wanted to make it look like a blaster holster. So it's like, well, I can have a flashlight holster to it. So I ended up doing leather work and creating the Han Solo blaster inspired iPhone case. I used that case for a very long time until I upgraded my phones. The ultralight senior citizen's bag is actually a bag I'm super proud of. My mother, who's 82, has arthritis. Her hands are not as flexible as they used to be. She had this favorite bag, but it was kind of bulky and heavy. And I went to my mother's place and said, I can build that lighter for you. So I took the bag. Like I said, I reversed engineered how it was. It was her favorite bag. She had some issues with the zipper, so I ended up doing a cinch top on it, which means it's like you pull a string and it closes down. And I used, that's a Cordura Spectra, diamond ripstop Spectra, which is a super lightweight, high-tech, abrasion-resistant fabric, super fun to work with. Kills your needles on your sewing machine like an instant after one thing, but. And so I built that bag and gave it to my mother, and it's now her favorite go-to around the corner store bag because it's exactly the same size that she was used to. It's much lighter, and she doesn't have to handle with a zipper. So yeah, that's one of those builds I'm really proud of. Now, these are the things that the next couple builds are the builds that I'm more known for, the Wi-Fi stuff, right? So once again, DALL-E gave me, when I asked for Wi-Fi Gadget, it basically gave me an image of Pope's broken phone, right? Oh, by the way, slide 18 out of 28, so we're almost there, Thanks for hanging in. So the Wi-Fi Scope. War Color Industries, I think it was their name. They make the Wi-Fi Scope. It's basically like a little scope device that you look, and it shows the access points based on their signal strength. But you only see the screen and you can't see through it. So I was like, I bet you I can make one where it's more like a HUD, that you actually can see what's beyond the viewpoint. And I had a D-Stack Wi-Fi D-Author board, and then I hunted down a Japanese manufacturer of halfway mirror glasses. And I asked them if they could sell me one of the industrial halfway mirror glasses that was 1 inch by inch. And usually those things are used for like industrial microscopes, I think, and other more industrial uses. And they were like, why do you want one? It's like, well, I'm working on this prototype. And it was going back and forth. They were like, well, we have a B stock that didn't pass our QA, but you can have one of them. So yeah, so I ended up buying like an industrial grade halfway mirror. And then I recoded it in a way that you can actually now see the DAuth menu, and you can see what you're pointing at. And then I put a panel directional antenna to it, so it actually points the direction, and you can see what you're doing there. The DAuth detector was a request by B-Side Las Vegas, because one year they had a real hard problem with people sending out DAuth packets in the venue. So Mr. Bill asked me if I could build a DAuth detector for them. But one of the requests was that it also had to be a deterrent for DAuth detector, so it had to be visible. So I was thinking about, okay, what story am I going to use for this one? And then it hit me, Judge Dredd. Because Judge Dredd has this nightstick that's like the cattle prod nightstick that lights up and makes this booming sound. So I was like, all right, I'll do that. So I grabbed a piece of wood, I vinyl coated it, and I put a strip of NeoPixels in there. There's an ESP8266 in there. I ended up cutting off the PCB antennas and wrapping it in copper tape to lower the sensitivity of the receiver, so that you practically have to be standing next to the person sending out the DAuth packets. But if you are, the neon strips will all go flashing red, right? So, and it worked. Apparently it worked, because they had a lot less DAuth attacks the next following year. As a kid, I loved Miami Vice. Don Johnson was my hero, Sonny Crockett, right? And when Hack5 came out with their new Wi-Fi Pineapple 7, I was like, I'm going to build a holster for that. So this classic holster is, I think it's called the Galco Miami Classic Holster that Sonny Crockett used in Miami Vice. So I took a whole bunch of pictures of Don Johnson going like this, right? And I basically built this leather holster that would hold the Wi-Fi Pineapple, so I could just like have it under my jacket. I have like a battery on the side. Like Sonny had his magazines here. And then I was like, well, that's kind of cool, but I want something else in it too. So I ended up embossing the Hydra logo on the shoulder portion of that. So it was like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. meets this Miami Vice kind of world, So yeah, I have poor taste in TV shows. So like I said, I do a lot of war walking. Just for distance-wise, I need you to understand why I am very picky about my bags and my rigs. Is that the one on the left is a 41K that I did for like 6 hours, which is almost a full marathon, 26 miles. The longest one I did is 100K, so that's 62 miles, where I walked 24 hours straight with a rig. So when you start doing that, every gram or every ounce or everything that annoys you gets magnified to its magnitude, right? So I ended up building these custom rigs over the years. The first one is the MasterPod, which I have over here. This was my first, this is version 7 of this, I think. I used the DSLR camera rig, aluminum camera rig, as its main frame, because I was watching Aliens. And in Aliens, they have the M314 motion tracker. They go around like this, right? And they're like, oh, it's over there, right? And I was like, it would be kind of cool if I had something like, I could go like this and find the Wi-Fi. It's kind of pointless because it's everywhere anyway. But the storyline I was trying to tell was something industrial and military, right? So I ended up building this out of, this carbon rod and aluminum rig. I have clocked over a couple 100 miles of war walking with this rig. This has been my monster beast. It has a directional panel antenna on top, because I also wanted to cover vertical, because I live in Tokyo, there's a lot of vertical buildings where the SSID is on top, so I figured putting a panel directional antenna on top would allow me to capture some of it. In reality, it's not much of a gain, but it looked cool. Then I built the Hackpot, which was an update because I wanted to add Bluetooth to it. The idea that I had there was more of a spy gadget, like something that would get more like a what do pen testers call it? A Dropbox, yeah, right? Dropbox. Yeah. Oh, so. And then I was looking at my backpack, and I was like, well, there's a bottle holder there. If I can make one that's the size of a Nalgene bottle, I can throw it in there, and I don't have to worry about building a backpack or anything, right? So I built one, and now it has a Raspberry Pi 4 inside. I cut the Nalgene bottle on the bottom, it slides up. There's airflow, there's antennas. In reality, Pixel 6 would kick the shit out of this performance. So this wasn't a successful build, but it led to a bunch of people making bottle-shaped builds. So I'm super happy about that. I think Kobeski, right? He released a USB add-on that you can put on a Raspberry Pi that will align your adapters perfectly. So you can buy it off his Teensy, I think. I know of some other people who have made bottle-shaped war driving rigs. So I'm happy about it. The Wiggle Pod, I have it here. I took off the orange cover now, but this, I was thinking, I want something that I could just throw in my bag like that and not worry about it. Because this thing, although it's a workhorse, I needed a custom bag. I needed to build a custom bag. I have to be really careful on placing it in there. I have to check on it once in a while to make sure that nothing knocked off. And I wanted something a little bit more sturdier. So I ended up building one of this WDriver. And this idea that I had was, I was looking at my sticker collection, and I had a sticker that said satellite flight equipment. So I was like, ooh, space station lab module, right? So I ended up building something that, if you go to the, I guess in the International Space Station, you can get assigned a module, what they call, whereas you can have like a micro experiment, you just slide in, and then you collect later. So I got all the government looking like stickers that I had, like flight equipment. There's the one this device contains atoms and is a tiny bit radioactive. I'll leave it here so you can come see it. But so that was the kind of idea that I had. It used to have antennas on the outside. Then Woody, my friend, gave me a bunch of PCB antennas, so it became a full module. Now, the process that I go through is basically eat, sleep, build, repeat. But according to DALI, that's eat, sleep, build, and repeat. I don't know. I think we're okay from the AI overlords. By the way, slide 22. We're almost there. I usually start with the prototype, right? I usually start with putting the components together and see where I want to make changes, how I want to make changes. So these are the ward drivers that I've built. As I start doing more and more long distances, I wanted to go even ultralight. So I started with Feathers, which is a platform by Adafruit, and I put the components together mainly to test the code and to think about what kind of user interaction I was thinking and what story I wanted it to tell. So the final build that came out of it was this, which is totally, looks like a detonator on purpose because that's the image I had. It has a big-ass red button on top. It has a toggle switch. There's an LED that blinks really bright. And, I used this for a while. And then Particle IO, a company, came out with a Photon 2 microprocessor, which was a significant upgrade from the ESP line because it could do dual band. So it could do 2.4 and 5 gigahertz in a microcontroller that is compatible with the Feather platform. So I got one of those, and then I was just like, I built a new one. And unlike the detonator model, this one I was more James Bond. I was like, I want a small device that I can throw in my pocket, turn it on. So I did get a toggle switch on top, so just to get that nice clicky feel to it. Like I said, if you don't know old James Bond gadget, find somebody old and they'll explain it to you. Right? But so whenever I share something, it's never it's never, the first revision. Like, this is a Raspberry Pi, portable Raspberry Pi deck that I built about 4 years ago. I went over 60 revisions of this from ground up. So I would build one, print one, test one, and I'm like, no. Like, even the color keyboard, I was like, no, I don't want green, I want red. So now I have to hunt down a red version, right? Which screen would match better and whatnot. So even though I post, like, my builds at social media and you see the final product, it's usually not the final product. It's like the one it's in between until it gets to the final product. And even then, that has gone through multiple revisions. So when you go on YouTube, you see a lot of one-day builds, right? But those are not necessarily true, because, when you start making, you understand that, you have to get an understanding of very low-level fundamentals, right? Hardware, software, material, when you do sewing, when you do microprocessors, you need to understand components. And then you have the software skills on top of that, right? You can code the firmware for the microcontroller. You can do a customized Linux install. You do, different sewing patterns, learning different seams, French seams, straight seams. And then you start to understand why some vendors make the decisions about products released to the market. Because sometimes you just need it quick enough, for you to use, which is the vendor going, hey, ship it, we'll fix it later, right? And then once you start doing it in mass, for example, building like one of these things for yourself is easy compared to building 1,000 of those and selling them, And then people complain about, well, I can't believe it's only 2.4 gigahertz and it's $150. I'm like, if you can find me a dual band rig that has 14 antennas and that's, under $200, you sign me up, Because vendors have to make profit, right? Then you start to understand, because now you have gone through the process of making, right? And you have to make these decisions, right? I get a lot of feedback on my build saying, well, you should have done this. Or like, have you considered? And 90% of the time, I have. And I've made a conscious decision not to go that route. But I often say, hey, like the Nalgene bottle build proves, please go out, build your own, and then come back to me. And they're like, yeah, we kicked your ass on that one. I'm like, good for you, man. I learned, right? So experience, knowledge, and failure all feed into the maturity of yourself as a maker, right? At the same time, technology changes, right? Sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. We all suffered through the Raspberry Pi famine of 2020, right? Or the GPU famine of, even earlier, right? But if you look at the, which one? I got to do Iceman now. Left? That's my first Wi-Fi box of doom back then, I called it that I built in 2014. It has 2 Raspberry Pi 3s in it, has an Anker battery, has an uplink Wi-Fi spot, and has maybe 2 adapters. It had a thermal switch that would activate the fan once it got too hot. A cell phone kicks ass of that right now, right? But it was, so when you think about it, is that all of these things that you go through, your failures, you're more aware about, how to handle materials and source code, and you go out and talk to friends like Dark Matter or Iceman, and you learn from them. All of that allows you to create more and bring your imagination closer to the reality or the story you're trying to tell. According to Dali, this is evolution. I have no idea what that is. But I want you to remember, I tell this often, everything we have right now, the screens, the floor, the gadgets, the projectors, the lights, the clothing we wear, the shoes we wear, this is thousands of years of somebody going, fuck, this shit doesn't work. I'm going to fix it. Right? And people are like, well, I'm sorry if cursing, cursing is nasty, but I'm sorry. So there was always a hacker somewhere going, you know, a wheel should be round, not square, damn it, right? Or like, you know, people are complaining, and I was having this conversation at DEF CON this year. People are like, what do you think about AI? Or what do you think about the internet? Social media is ruining humanity. It's like, realize that, you know, the internet and AI only have been around for like, what, 30, 40 years? We still have fire departments. That means we still haven't controlled one of the fundamental findings of humanity, fire, right? And you're asking if we can control the internet? Of course not, right? But we can't give up because we are at peak evolution. Tomorrow is going to be something else, but right now, this is the peak of our evolution. So, you know, let's go out and hack shit and fix shit. Desmond Llewellyn, I realized that I was showing Pope my slides, and he goes, "Who's that?" I'm like, oh, God, I'm old. That's the original Q from James Bond. And he goes, Pope goes, "Oh, that's good. Questions time." He's like, no. Q is the gadget master of James Bond. He is the guy that allows the hero to go save the world with the gadgets he provides. That's who I aspire to be. I'm too much of a coward to go out and save the world, but I'll give you the gadgets to do it, right? Anyway, thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity. Let's go out and make stuff. Questions, if you want to come up and touch. And now that fucking Iceman gave something to SAINTCON to auction off profit, I have to give something. All right, you can have the detonator then. For the record, on video, my gift is bigger than his. Thank you all. Any questions? I can't see for sure. Yeah.
Do you know what Q stands for?
Yeah, quartermaster.
Yes.
And the Q division.
Yes.
Yes. Not questions, Pope.
Can you repeat their question?
Oh, yeah. So the question was, what does Q stand for? Q is actually a job title, which then became a division. Okay, I'm a James Bond nerd. It stands for quartermaster.
More questions.
Another question. Who is the best James Bond?
There's no such thing as the best James Bond. They're all relevant. That's like asking, who's your favorite child? I have two.
Be honest, you have a favorite.
Yeah, the younger one's kind of cuter than the older one, but I love the older one too, but you know. No, because James Bond, I'm going to go into a James Bond tangent here. James Bond is a social it's relevant to the social times. If you look at Sean Connery, James Bond right now, it is really creepy. If you look at Roger Moore, James Bond, it's stupid. If you look at Pierce Brosnan, James Bond, it is just kind of out there, man. It's just like, but then if you look at Daniel Craig, which is like everybody's favorite, right? Yeah, the ladies love him, right? It's the sensitive James Bond, right? But there's not many gadgets. Like Roger Moore had the best gadgets ever, right? So, but yeah. Any questions? I can't see, so there's a lot.
We're out of time.
I'm sorry.
When you're running or war walking,
Yep.
How do you deal with things flapping around? Like, okay, anytime I'm moving at any speed, I have my bag. It's
Oh, we're talking about gear, right? Not
both kinds of gear. One I've already solved. Okay,
good underwear. No, so, no. No, so the question is, how do I deal with things flapping around when I run and war walk? I went down a rabbit hole of trail running gear and looked the way they handled things flapping around. So straps, power mesh, different fabrics that could give a little bit more, where I could make it more tighter, and different weight of elastic bands. And I strap it down pretty good. So, and at the same time, you know, I walk a lot because Dragorn did a research where the channel hop speed and walking speed is actually better synced than a car. So it's on his blog, on the Kismet blog. Hey, Dragorn, I love you. Thank you for all the work. All right, we're out of time, right? Come find me. I'll be around, so.